delighted to welcome on stage now Mahesh Patel. You will know him if you're a member of the PNG business community. This year, Mahesh is celebrating 30 years since the founding of City Pharmacy Limited, his business which started off in just 2 pharmacies, I believe, in Port Moresby, and is now well, just simply put, PNG's largest retail chain. Owns Stop and Shop, Hardware House, the City Pharmacy outlets, and Paradise Cinemas in Port Moresby, and all sorts of retail outlets. So has really been a pioneer in retail in Papua New Guinea. And this afternoon, the last session of the day, Mahesh will be talking a little bit more about how he's worked, particularly with joint venture partners, on getting some of his retail operations and ideas into practice in PNG. So make sure you come and stay for that session this afternoon. It'll be really interesting. But Mahesh is here with a different hat on now, and it's a hat which, for those of you in the room yesterday morning when Mark Pesci was talking, Mark was basically saying that over the next 5 years, PNG needs to get serious about getting smartphones into the hands of 85% of the population, and making sure that there was internet connectivity to go with those smartphones. And that was going to be something that, in his view, between now and 2050 was going to be critical in turning PNG from a least developed country with a GDP per capita as it is now, to being a medium developed country as Malaysia is now. The man whose shoulders that heavy burden falls to for the moment, Mahesh, is you as the chairman of the newly branded Kumul Telecom. So I'm delighted Mahesh is on stage with me today in conversation, or should I say in dialogue, depending on what the APEC language is now. So will you please make him welcome? Mahesh, perhaps we'll start with the reorganisation of the state-owned telcos in PNG. For those people who are not familiar with what's been going on this year, perhaps if you wouldn't mind just briefly outlining what the fundamental changes are.
Thanks, Andrew. Let me go back first. Years gone by, I think 2009, as you know, the Telecom, as it stands today, was split up. The mobility arm was pulled out into what is today B-Mobile. And in 2014, Datacom was created to look after the infrastructure and backhaul. Obviously, over the years, we found that strategy was probably, there was a flaw in it. It didn't quite work out, and literally, if it stood together, stood rather individually as it stands now, all 3 enterprises will fail. So late last year, the government put out a NEC directive of merging all the 3 entities into one. So we've gone through a very detailed selection process of trying to find a transition manager or transition team as such, and just recently we're in the process of appointing Deloitte Worldwide. Whilst it's an accounting firm, they've got huge assets internationally of people capability out of developing markets. So we were very particular that we got people not as just bean counters, but who understood technology and telecommunications. So the contract is being processed as we speak for to them to get on the ground as soon as possible, to start firstly planning on paper for the next 4 to 8 weeks of the technical integration of the 3 entities, of what is the best model going forward, together with financial capabilities of a combined entity, and then obviously the people capability. So that exercise will kick off in the next coming weeks.
I noticed that there is a slight hurdle to come as far as ICCC approval. Do you foresee any issues with that?
No, ICCC, to the best of my knowledge, is we've got a tick off on all that, so that's all fine.
Excellent. So as far as branding of the organisation is concerned, what will be the lead brand of this new organisation?
Good question. Actually, I think the jury's out on that. There's a possibility of what the strategy comes out of the Deloitte finding, that we could possibly run two brands. It's not the ideal situation, but it's been done in the other markets. Both B-Mobile and Telecom in its own rights are strong brands around the nation. As you go further out into remote areas, as you know, Telecom's 60 years old. There is, while the perception and delivery of service have been poor over the time, there is a lot of strong holding towards the name Telecom. So I think we'll cross that bridge in the next couple of months.
Okay. In the room yesterday, we had a panel discussion, and Dr. Stephen Nash from Number One Super, and I think also Eric Kramer, who's advisor to NASFund on their funds management, were talking about their willingness to invest in the international cable, undersea cable, that's being considered and is, I believe, badly needed to both for redundancy purposes and also for bandwidth purposes. What progress has there been? What models are currently being looked at for the undersea cable, and where do you see the timeline for actually getting to a decision on how that cable is going to occur and when it's going to occur and what the nature of that will be and what participation there might be for private sector investment?
I think it's been a bee in my bonnet for the last 4 years since I've been chairman, because that was the first risk that we identified to the nation as a whole of the current very old undercapacity cable that we've got running. We should have done it 4 years ago, but that's water under the bridge now. And we've chugged along over the last 4 years looking at various options. And it's come at a time where the economic situation is pretty bad. Funds are dried up. So we need to look at various options. 4 years ago, we could have funded it ourselves. We had the capability and capacity financially. So at the moment, we're exploring. There is a huge urgency of getting it started like yesterday. So we've got options of private sector participation. The expectation of returns are obviously high there. We've got World Bank who are keen to fund it. It's a slow process, but cheap money. We got other private financial institutions who are looking at build, lease, and transfer. Again, an expensive model, but can be done very quickly. So all three options are on the table. Dataco, which is the entity that's looking after it right now whilst the merge process is happening, is assessing all three options. And we're looking at going to the cabinet as early as in the next couple of weeks with the proposal to proceed.
And will that is the preferred model, or the models you're considering, including other Pacific nations in that? Because that's something that obviously has been canvassed previously, is using a cable that may connect other parts of Melanesia to the World Wide Web in a more effective way?
The short answer is no.
Right.
Let's get PNG fixed first and not be the big brothers of the Pacific and try and fix everybody else's problems. We tried, or the previous regime tried to go through Vanuatu. I think it was a mistake to have 4 hops to then cross on and attach to the Southern Cross cable to go through Solomons, Vanuatu, Fiji. I mean, we will be the biggest consumers of all the Pacific Islands. And the most logical route always has been, and the advice we've got from experts from Telstra, is go directly to Sydney. Sydney is very well connected. It will bring the prices down, and we can get it done very quickly.
So that's an undersea cable directing PNG to Sydney. And are you looking at any other options other than from Port Moresby?
No, most of the studies have said Port Moresby is the, because bulk of the volume is out of Port Moresby at the moment. And with the inter-island submarine cable, which the government approved last year, that will then connect to all the other ports.
Right, okay. So at the moment, you have the cable that goes out of Madang, and you have the one that comes out of Ella Beach, and then this will effectively mean you can retire the Ella Beach connection, or will you be retaining that?
No, that could fall over any day. That's got a 1 gig capacity, and we're talking about 100 gig capacity minimum at this stage. So,
okay. The other thing Mark Pesce referred to yesterday is the importance of getting the handsets into people's hands and smartphones. And I certainly possibly because of my love of Apple products, when I think of a smartphone, I think of an iPhone. But of course, all it needs to be doing is running an Android operating system, and as you pointed out yesterday, those are very inexpensively available in PNG right now, and a lot of people already have them in their hands. What's your expectation about the uptake on smartphone in PNG, based on what's already happening on the ground?
I think he's given us a challenge.
Yeah.
He's quoted figures of from 20 to 28% to up to 80%. I think therein lies a line in the sand for us to target that. Mm-hmm. Affordability is a main factor. I mean, I'm an iPhone fan as well, but I know there are Android phones available out of China and India and European countries. So I think if we can source cost-effective phones or handsets quickly and get it into the hands of the public, that'll be the easiest way to go.
Mm-hmm. Huawei, of course, is in PNG now, and you have Digicel, which is, and certainly in the mobile space, the dominant player. It would seem that as far as driving down prices and availability is concerned, competition is going to be critical. Now, certainly from talking to business people in PNG, B-Mobile, Vodafone has made a headway in becoming more competitive with Digicel, and Telecom now has its own mobile offering. So what would you be hoping for, and what do you need to become more competitive with Digicel to get that situation where there's a real competition on pricing and availability of product?
I think the merging of the organizations will give us a huge heads up. Let's be practical. Telecom is a state-owned entity. We are lethargic, slow in getting to market. B-Mobile have got the expertise of the front end. So by combining the resources, we've got some of the best engineers in Telecom, but it lacks that commercial nous. And it's frustrating at times coming from a private sector. But I think the combination of the two entities together, and keeping in mind that Telecom has got 4G now, which is really, it's not completely rolled out. We've got about 250 towers done, another 65 on the way, which still is not quite enough for the country, but it's a start for major centers. So if we were able to roll out the 4G, which is a higher quality product, B-Mobile has been operating in the 3G market, but a vast number of people out there are on the 2G, 3G, and firstly because of connectivity issues, bandwidth availability, and cost. So I think we will need to operate on the 2, 3, and 4G levels to start with, and as people convert onto 4G and much more data requirement, and it's going to happen very quickly. I don't think we'll have to wait for years and years. It's going to happen in the next year, 2 years.
At the end of last year, we ran a straw poll on Facebook through our Facebook group, asking people what their bandwidth speeds were like in their whatever part of PNG they were in. And in Port Moresby, they were right up there with the kind of speeds. In fact, they were actually faster than the speeds I was getting in Melbourne at the time for my mobile phone. So there's certainly, you could say in Port Moresby and possibly Lae, you might be reaching there. What are the prospects for better bandwidth and speeds in other parts of PNG?
I think as we roll out, I mean, the intention is to get right across to the village level. But, we've got huge challenges as well of, the terrain, the towers put up, landowner issues, landslides and vandalism. And I'm still getting my head around vandalism because it pays nothing to anybody. Yet, our equipments have been destroyed over time. So I think it will roll out. We're going out to the major centers now, and with the high capacity network that we've got as a backup, which is almost 80% complete, and we tested it out during the South Pacific Games, where all our Wi-Fi went through our HCN network, and it worked out quite well. Mm-hmm. People were streaming. Recently, we had the World Surfing League in Alatau, and most of the participants actually, I got told that 100 million viewers watched that internationally, and a lot of the participants streamed from out of Alatau. So I think it is slow. It's much slower than I'd like, but as we roll out, I think it'll just improve more and more over time.
Now, PNG is in the process of completing the national transmission network or the national broadband network, which my understanding is that's going to connect the major population centres with fibre optic cable. Is that on schedule? It was due, I think, to be completed at the end of this year. And if not, when do you expect it to be finished? And I guess the next question on from that is, where do we build out? What's the next step once that network is completed?
Well, we've got the PNG LNG fibre, which goes from Port Moresby to Hydes. So that was put in place by the LNG operators. We've been able to link up the PNG Power OPG from Lae to Madang and on to Yonki, if people must know the geography of Papua New Guinea here. And we've gone up to Mendi, which it's starting to now cover a very large population of Papua New Guinea. So Mendi to Hydes is what we call the missing link. Once that is done, and again, it's been constraints on funding, which has slowed that down, but we're very close again to tie that link very quickly because it will give us redundancy and backup for the APAC, as Charles Lapani was talking about. So that is about 18 or 20 kilometers, but again, it's virgin territory, new power poles. Electricity is not quite up there yet, so we're looking at hybrid systems of power support. So whilst it's a very short run, we've got our challenges there. But we're very mindful that it needs to be finished before the end of this year.
So that's still the aim, is
Yes.
by the end of this year, that loop will be completed.
Yes.
And what do you think business will see as a result of that?
I think more than business, it is the Highlands region, more than the business, it'll be people out in corridors around the mining areas where they don't have much connectivity. They'll start getting all this. But also it will give people in the Highlands region, it already has actually, with the HCN already, give some continuity and reliability of services.
And then I guess the challenge will be to build out from there. So that's stage 2, effectively, into the islands, into the more remote parts of the Highlands. There's already a mobile phone network of sorts in a lot of those areas. When do you expect that process to happen, and who's going to be driving that?
Well, obviously Telecom has to do it. And as we go further and further, our resources get stretched. So we'll be looking at private sector partners, at least in the rollout and distribution of it all. So we will have to partner. There are some agencies who are looking at doing that. There are instances out in the remote areas where people are struggling to find top-up cards and all that. But with BSP now serving top-ups out of ATMs, we're going online. So as connectivity increases, broadband's up there, availability and top-up of the services will be available in remote areas as well.
Another thing, Mark, we're coming back to Mark's presentation yesterday. It was quite a challenging one, I imagine, both for telcos and for banks who were in the room yesterday. One of his suggestions was that banks and telcos need to merge, or at least banks need to get into telecommunications and telecommunications companies need to get into banking. Digicel has the only mobile financial license, which is issued by the Bank of PNG at the moment. Are you encouraged by what Mark's comments were yesterday to think maybe you should be getting into that business too?
I think that let's get a reliable service first, and we'll talk to banking, and I'll speak to Robin Fleming when I get back up to PNG. But I think the key is, firstly, I think it's a great vision to have, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I mean, we can get into, say, let's get into financial inclusion and all that, but not having the services, consistent, reliable service and affordable, it's not going to serve the purpose.
And I guess you referred to it earlier, the challenge of funding all this. Everybody wants fantastic bandwidth everywhere now, but obviously that has to be paid for. As a state-owned entity, what options are available to Telecom as far as funding is concerned, and what's your preferred model, given that, as you said, there is cheap money, but often attached to that is an element of rigour?
Well, coming from the private sector, I've always told the government that we'd like to get it self-funded. we've got limitations of restructuring. I think Telecom itself has got enough assets to be able to go out and borrow in its own rights. But we need this restructure done first. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. That's why I was saying 4 years ago, we had a reasonably clean balance sheet. It was very clean. Dataco was not created. All the assets set in the one box, and we were able to leverage off and actually go out and commercially borrow. And it could be serviced as well with the revenues we have. But with the split up of all the entities, it's just got messier. Once we get it all together, I'm sure we can go out and borrow, but it's just not happening fast enough.
The partnership that B-Mobile has with Vodafone UK is an interesting one, and it's as a perception, it's something that's not only helped their branding, but actually seems to be helping their marketing and delivery of service. How's that relationship gone from your point of view, and do you see there are opportunities to work with other telcos, either in the region or elsewhere in the world, in order to help some of this happen quicker?
With the Vodafone, I've only just recently have had access to the deal that was put on, but I think Vodafone is world class. It's got best practices, and you can see that in B-Mobile as we're starting to engage with them a lot more. It's only recently that the government has bought out the full 100%. So now we've got open access to B-Mobile, and there are a lot of learnings from that. So it's something, again, we'll sit down and talk to them after the restructure, because we need to tell them where we're heading first. So as soon as the merger and restructure is happening, we're sitting down with them, looking at them, and we need to. Papua New Guinea, we're somewhat sort of sheltered of exposure to the world outside. Our engineers, our people, whilst they're excellent in what they do, they lack exposure to the international standards. So I think aligning ourselves with an international operator will help our folks.
Mahesh, your own personal business story involves working with consumers and servicing consumers and being very focused on the needs of consumers. And I imagine that's one of the credentials that made you an ideal person to go and chair Telecom. Assuming, let's look forward maybe 2-3 years, we've done the reorganization, the network is built out, we're starting to get some of the data speeds that other countries in the region have already got. As far as engagement with consumers, what would you like to see, or what hope is there for PNG business as far as the kind of things you'd like to see delivered over the internet that maybe aren't delivered now, or services that will be available to Papua New Guineans that are currently not able to be delivered to them?
I think all you need to do is see what's happening out in the world. You talk about e-commerce, you're talking about mobile apps, you're talking about e-education, e-health. A whole bunch of these can be moved on to the platforms. We're talking about streaming of videos and all that, all on handsets now. So I think from a consumer's perspective, and coming from a consumer background, the idea is to give what the public wants, is fast internet and at affordable prices. We have dropped prices quite a bit, but it's still not up to the world standards that we'd like. But as soon as these undersea cables in place, we'll have the capacity to drop the price to standards of what we get in Australia. That's the ultimate goal.
So by a factor of how much compared to what they are now would you expect?
Well, at the wholesale level, we're doing some numbers. If the wholesale price today, as it is, we were looking at a third of that right now at wholesale. But obviously then we'll need to create more ISPs, more retail focus to then bring the price down to the consumers. 4 years ago, we had pretty crappy internet. We still are pretty average. I mean, consumers were paying 200 kina per gig at a retail level. Today, it is 25 kina. And I think that can go down further.
Well, I think everyone in the room would be very appreciative of you going to achieve that. We're looking forward to the Deloitte guys arriving in town. I'm sure they'll be well looked after. Mahesh, good luck with this project. It sounds like it's something that PNG badly needs, and it sounds like it's something that certainly there's a roadmap for the future. So please thank Mahesh again for talking today.